Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. As the IT surveys at BBC offices in Mumbai and the national capital continue for a third straight day without a break, a mega narrative war has erupted in the country. Now, weeks after India banned the circulation of BBC's two-part documentary on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Vice President Jagdeep Dhankhar has warned of global news houses pushing fake narratives. Terming the dumping of information as a new form of invasion, the Vice President said doctored narratives cannot be allowed to hamper India's growth. The VP was addressing probationers of the Indian Information Service and asked them to be vigilant about untrue narratives designed to undermine India's global rise. He stressed that time is of the essence in countering these dubious and motivated information war against India. The opposition has been critical of the Modi-led government for allegedly being dictatorial and not allowing differences of opinion. They were also up in arms, for example, when IT officials reached the BBC offices 2 days ago, terming it an attack on democracy in India and a bid to muzzle media. Remember, from time to time, BBC, for example, has faced flack from many in India and for decades in India for repeated biased or derogatory coverage. Their stance is usually anti-India, which is to say on issues, for example, of Pak-born terror or Kashmir. Their coverage is often against Indian interests. Similarly, there are many publications that routinely surmise on India what is good, what is bad, what should happen. And mostly these are opinions masquerading as facts without much understanding on India or Indians themselves. So is it not time that Indians become a little bit more critical in their analysis of such reports to separate what is actually a report from propaganda and vested interests? Remember, there's always a geopolitical aspect also attached to what foreign media says on any country, not just India. Are we moving in that direction though? What do we need to do to educate our masses more on how information coming from outside should be critically analyzed? We'll take those questions to our guests in just a bit. But first up, without mincing words, the Vice President raised the misinformation invasion alarm. And here are some of the top 5 statements that do trigger a larger debate. So attack number 1, he said there's a need to counter, quote, sinister designs against India's growth story. And as India becomes, one of the largest major economies, fastest growing major economies, that is something that's a concern that many have voiced, both in India and overseas. Attack number 2, there are doctored narratives and they cannot be allowed to run down India. Attack 3, dumping of information is another way of invasion. I personally feel this is one of the most critical statements the VP has made, and we'll debate that further. He said we have to boldly neutralize misinformation invasion. Nothing wrong in that. He was also addressing the information officers, so it was more topical for them. He said misinformation cannot be allowed in the name of freedom of expression, and that's a debate we've held for a long time. His main point is there are forces inimical to India. We need to battle motivated biased news that seeks to set the agenda of what should or should not happen in India, but by people sitting abroad. Here are few instances when Western media chose to attack what is very much an Indian system or what has happened in India, which has come under question. So, of course, the latest is the BBC docu-series, which harped on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's role in 2002 Gujarat riots, without even a mention of the fact that he's been given a clean sheet from India's top court twice. In 2021, you would remember, New York Times had claimed that India's COVID death number and the toll is much higher than reported. But the entire analysis was done on estimates, based on randomly selected numbers. It did not really explain why or how these estimates were made. Time magazine in 2019, for example, called the sitting Prime Minister, who was also the incumbent, India's divider-in-chief on its cover story. What's important about this is the fact that it came out in the midst of the general elections in 2019. So what's the message that is being sent? Of course, I've left out a lot of such editorials that have been done because it's not so much about opinion alone. It is about what is presented as a report and factually based reports versus what is propaganda. So the big question we're debating today, as the Vice President Dhankar slams quote doctored narrative, is it not time to put India first? How do we do that is also a big question.
This is another way of invasion. We cannot allow free fall of doctored narratives to run down our growth story. India is on the rise. Sinister designs are there to set afloat a narrative by free fall of information. We have to be alert.
Hypocrisy. Even a small writer put up for Modi ji, truth is revealed and then they say that it's anti-national. For same BBC news broadcast, Mr. Modi used to appreciate. They don't tolerate the truth.
Let's go across to the guest joining us. Ikram Sandhu is Congress spokesperson. The BJP has declined to be part of this debate. Abhijit Majumdar, First Post consulting editor. Veena Sikri is former diplomat. She was also a signatory against the recent BBC documentary. Adit Kothari is Indic Society founder. He's based in London. I want to begin with Ikram Sandhu. What is wrong with what the Vice President has talked about? For example, if we talk about just the BBC itself, in the 1970s, Indira Gandhi banned the BBC. She didn't like the coverage and the way the BBC presented India. Congress members, representatives, leaders were writing letters of how BBC should not be allowed to function in India. We've come some way from them, from that time, but the concerns remain. Do you find any objections in what the Vice President has said?
Good evening, Shivani. A very warm good evening to my co-panelist and to all your viewers. You know, Shivani, we always hark back to what happened in the 70s. Fair enough. But then a country always progresses if it looks forward. If you drive by looking in the rearview mirror, you will never have a speed more than 20 kilometers per hour. That is applicable to an automobile. That is applicable to a nation. So if we have to grow, we have to come out of the siege mentality that this current dispensation is in. Till the time something is written positive about them, everything is gung-ho. He goes to Houston, in a stage-managed program, there is Wawai. So he becomes the Vishwa Guru and the whole Vishwa is following the Vishwa Guru. And suddenly one documentary, which is critical of him, and the whole world has ganged up against him. So this is something like a kindergarten kid will behave like that. A responsible government which heads the biggest democracy in the world should not behave like that. And this is what we really take umbrage to, because it is showing India as a class bully which cannot take any criticism, be it constructive, be it destructive. That's a different thing. We can debate that also. But in the world space, what it is coming out is that India has become an intolerant country with an intolerant government and a very intolerant prime minister.
Ikram, I kind of agree with what you're saying. You have to take the good with the bad. I don't have any disagreement on that. But we will discuss whether these criticisms are fair or are they agenda setting and motivated propaganda. Secondly, the question also is that, you look at these, for example, you look at some of this critique. It started even before he became Prime Minister, right? Even in 2014, this critique started, and the same critique is going on till ahead of 2024. So have you formed your opinion? Did you form your opinion even before you could judge him as a Prime Minister? Are you forming your opinion on the basis of what is happening in India? Or it's a prejudged situation? That's the question.
This is for me, Shivani?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take that. Look, Shivani, if you can't take the heat, don't stand in the kitchen. You're the Prime Minister of the country, for crying out loud. What is it that any criticism is an attack on the government, is an attack on the nation, it is anti-national, and there is this cabal of world powers which are just, doing something so that India can be shown down. And if there's a criticism of Mr. Modi, it's a criticism of the whole nation. The country is much bigger. Prime ministers come, prime ministers go. And that is the bottom line.
Okay.
Now, if there is any documentary, let's say we talk about the 2002 riots, they have come up with certain facts. You go against those facts. We respect it that, yes, our courts have exonerated him. Then I can hold the same argument against Mr. Modi. He raved and rant in the parliament about Bofors, about 2G. In both the courts have exonerated everybody. Then he is the Indian version of the BBC.
Okay.
No, you can't have it that, if it is in my left hand, I accept it. And if it is in my right hand, I do not accept it.
Okay,
No,
fair enough. Can I open this up to the rest of our guests now? Abhijit, Ikram has a point. There's a lot of good coverage, a lot of praise, a lot of critical analysis of India's growth story and let's say what Prime Minister Narendra Modi represents in India, that is also done. So we have to take the good with the bad. We cannot call all criticism doctored.
Shivani, can you cite one other prime minister about whom negative reports have been coming out since 2002? Every single day till now. Let us go through the reports in Washington Post, New York Times, BBC, Al Jazeera. Let's take all of them from COVID. Every single day they have hit out at Modi. Now to say that Narendra Modi has reacted is intolerant. What about those reports? Those reports, if you add them, it will go from Earth to Pluto. Yeah, I mean, it'll form a whole paper trail from Earth to Pluto. If you look at the kind of criticism that has happened in media against Narendra Modi, so this is not even a point. Second is the BBC action against BBC is not on the basis of narrative setting. Because, and everybody is, absolutely in their rights to criticize and look at the narrative setting that BBC and other Western media has been doing. However, the action that has been taken against them is about transfer pricing and serious financial stuff. So you cannot, this whole thing of crying wolf and, playing the victim when it comes to scrutiny of your own house, invoking freedom of press and whatever, this doesn't wash. Okay. So if you're clean, then come clean.
No, I'm not linking the IT survey per se. I don't want to link the IT survey per se to what we are discussing.
So
Let's not do that.
Linking it.
Yeah.
However, it is true that there is, earlier colonization was about land. Now colonization is about is of information. Colonies are being built on information. Now, why is the American Senate hearing day
Twitter
after day
tech,
about how big tech interfered in politics? From Gulf War onwards, information has been used and media has been actually not just complicit. I mean, it has been one of the main players, pushing the agenda of, first weapons of mass destruction basis, which America and its allies attacked Iraq. So, and that was I would say the beginnings of the information war. It has become much larger, far more insidious right now.
Okay.
And the media company, the media outlets will have to sort of account for that. There will be, you can whitewash your mainstream media with whatever they want, but on social media and other, more democratic platforms, these questions will be raised.
Okay.
What are you doing? What is the BBC doing when India just became the president of G20?
Okay, fair enough. But can I add one thing, Abhijit, on what you were saying? I want to go across to Veena Sikri also, because the Vice President also said, I think what he has talked about information war or dumping of information, because in this day and age, sometimes too much information is also a problem. But he has also said that everything can be whitewashed and can go down the drain if people are not vigilant against such tendency. He questioned some of these agencies that have large world reputations. For example, the weapons of mass destruction theory in the past to attack a country. Those reputations have failed humanity in recent years, he said. How come Indian mind immediately absorbs something does not analyze what if you compare vicious mechanism designed to afloat a narrative to run down the growth story of this country, all in the name of freedom of expression. So I think he's raising a question also that you look at the past record of some of these so-called global media houses, they really don't have the pedestal to preach anybody. Veena Sikri. Veena ji, can you hear me? That question was for you. I'm
Is
not
it for me? No.
Yes, that
Hello?
was for you. If you heard me, please go ahead.
Hello. Is that for me? The question is for me?
Can we try and sort out that line with Veena Sikri?
Yes,
Maybe there's
I'm
a
here now.
lag.
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, ma'am.
Hello, can you hear me?
Let's try and fix that.
Hello.
Why doesn't Adit take that question? You're also based in London. You're looking at a lot of these reports that are written about India, what the narrative about Hinduism, Hindutva, militant Hindutva party, this, that, nationalist Hinduism, etc., etc. And then, of course, there are countless other things. But on point of what I mentioned as well, you look at the track record of some of these global houses, they're very sanctimonious when they preach to India. And I think that's what is beginning to irritate people here.
That's correct, Swati. I mean, representing the diaspora, I must admit that most of us, as part of the diaspora, feel extremely disgruntled and dissatisfied with the opposition in India, the irresponsibility that they have demonstrated in all of this saga. They seem to be stuck in this constant and confused loop. And that loop is essentially how to impede the growth of BJP and Narendra Modi. And this is causing immense loss not only to their own cause, but also by supporting institutions like the BBC. They are failing to take cognizance from their own mistakes. The disinformation that was disseminated with regards to the 2002 riots only benefited the BJP in 2014. A lot of us may recall that. So they should in fact support the BJP and question those tainted individuals with questionable backgrounds who have produced this hit job. People like Mr. Vardarajan, who have called 84 riots a Hindu-Sikh issue, Susanna Arundhati Roy, who have essentially supported an armed struggle against separatists, who supported the armed struggle of the separatists against the Union of India. Supporting them, they are only hurting their own chances in 2024 and bolstering that of the BJP. As far as this particular tax survey goes, the general consensus of the people of India and the diaspora explicitly is well done, Government of India, because you are taking on big bully corporations who've called Jai Shri Ram a provocative slogan, who've called Indian Army a violative, but the Syrian Islamists a moderate, Burhan Wani as a freedom fighter, and the terrorists who jumped on the ship on the boat and came to Bombay in 2008, they call them gunmen instead of terrorists. So they've always demonstrated this shoddy attitude towards India, and their journalism has always treaded on this path to malign India as a civilizational state. I mean, a lot of people will not realize and not remember, but Subhash Chandra Bose had essentially said on Azad Hind Radio that BBC is the bluff and bluster corporation of India. So I'm glad that this government is actually taking on these bully corporations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's not actually known maybe 75 years post-independence, but the kind of views that British government, for example, a lot of noted British authors, politicians, society, thought leaders have had on quote-unquote Indians and quote-unquote Hindus. If you read about that, it's absolutely appalling. And one really needs to question if some of those mindsets are being carried down, because just the tone and tenor in which sometimes India and Indians are referred with, you would remember that famous cartoon also that showed India knocking on the door of the, space club with a cow in hand and all of that. I mean, it is derogatory. But I want to bring in Veena Sikri. Ma'am, can you hear me clearly?
Yes,
if
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah,
Yes,
if you can, your comments on what the Vice President has said. Very importantly, he's saying there's an information dump. And this is a new form of invasion. He's using that word, which is very, very serious.
Well, actually, I must say that I fully agree with what the Vice President has said. And it is very significant that he said it while he was addressing 3 batches of probationers of the Indian Information Service. And in the future career of these young officers, they are going to face this. They're going to face this information war, and they have to decide how to tackle it. So this misinformation campaign, the disinformation campaign, this used to be very much prevalent in war times, but now in peace times, to attack economies and with the help of social media and all kinds of information and communication networks, this kind of warfare is being unleashed on all countries to assert or to keep up the superiority of the so-called West. And they cannot take it that now, for example, the economy of India has surpassed that of the UK. And in PPP terms, we are already the purchasing power parity terms, we are already the 3rd largest economy in the world. So now, I've seen that some of your panelists are saying, no, but why are we responding? And so, but it is very important that we take a considered view on each such attack and we decide how and when we should respond. On the BBC documentary, it was definitely a hit job, completely one-sided, completely ignoring what the Supreme Court of India has said, and in fact pretending that the Supreme Court's judgment did not even exist. I mean, what more misinformation and disinformation can you spread that after considering the whole matter for several years, the Supreme Court has come to a considered decision exonerating Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and you, when making a documentary 20 years after the event, do not want to even mention the case. This shows the biased minds. Yeah. This shows that you're trying to influence people against the Prime Minister of India, and I think if that is the case, then certainly, every institution in India, the Indian Information Service, probationers or government or media should come together and call a spade and say that we will not as a country accept such a disinformation campaign.
Okay.
And I think
can I ask you what seems to be coming out is 2 things. One is that the Western media, at least sections of it, are very, very vehemently anti-Modi. Do you believe that is the case, and if so, why? And the second is, to play the devil's advocate, should we believe that the West is so anti-India, or there are pockets of this so-called Western press that are very anti-India? What reasons would they have on both these issues?
You see, I think one has to see this at different level. Now, if we take it at the level of heads of government, presidents and prime ministers, certainly we've seen a huge wave of support for Prime Minister Modi. Just yesterday, when the announcement of the Tata purchase of aircraft, Boeing and Airbus, we saw statements put out by President Joe Biden himself, by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, by President Emmanuel Macron, all supporting Prime Minister Modi and saying what a big contribution this purchase by India is going to be, of course, to the economy of India, but also to the economy of these countries. So Indian purchases are fueling economic growth.
But why are they considered anti-Modi? Why do you think so? The Western media is anti-Modi.
Yes, so this is at the Prime Minister's level. But when you come to the media, you do have a strong left liberal media, which seems to, absolutely specialize in criticizing Prime Minister Modi and creating absolute hatchet jobs against him. The Washington Post, the New York Times, the BBC, the Economist. I mean, they have been relentless for the last 14 years.
No, I think that's right. Relentless is quite the apt word to use, because as I mentioned, a lot of the judgment on Prime Minister Narendra Modi came even before he became Prime Minister. You didn't even wait to see what his performance was. I have 2 minutes left. I'll give a minute each to Ikram and Abhijit. Ikram, one of the points that our panelists made is that it is actually detrimental to the Congress, one of the largest and the oldest political parties in the country, to be seen more with these narrative setters than with India. Don't you think that Congress is also treading the wrong path in your fight against Modi and BJP? There should be a line you should draw when it comes to India.
They say that India is the, mothership of democracy and things like that. That is what the current dispensation says. And then what do they say? That the whole Western media is against us. Which are the kind of countries which come up with excuses like this? North Korea, China, Iran, Afghanistan, Syria. So they want India to join that line. Come on, be a strong nation. No media can ever make you. No media can ever break you. If you do good work, it will be recognized. If there are skeletons in the cupboard, they will come out. Okay. You cannot do cherry picking the way this current government does. That in 2013, the Prime Minister says that Kashwani koi nahi sunta. दूरदर्शन कोई नहीं सुनता, गांव में सारे बीबीसी सुनते हैं क्योंकि बीबीसी की क्रेडिबिलिटी है, जो वो खबर देता है वो सही होती है. 2023 BBC is a bakwas corporation. That is what this current dispensation says. There is the right cases
but can I
against
just
Mr.
say,
Modi.
I get your point,
He
but I
raves
think
and rants about it.
there is the question over that
Finish, just let me
credibility
finish
that
one
has
point.
been built by some of these global media houses. Does
I'll
that
just finish.
credibility
I'll just
still
finish.
stay, or has it been eroded? Is a question. Okay, finish, please.
Please, just 30 seconds, Shivani, please, just indulge me there. The Prime Minister and all the surrogates say that because the Supreme Court has exonerated the Prime Minister, nothing can be put on record as far as the 2002 record is concerned. Fair games, let that be. Then why does the Prime Minister and the Parliament brings up Bofors when in 2012 the same Supreme Court has exonerated everybody, closed all case and said no kickbacks were ever paid in Bofors?
Okay, fair enough. I think you made that point. I take that point of yours.
Yes.
You cannot play it both ways. Abhijit, I have a final minute left. One of the things that I'm also trying to understand, and I have paucity of time, so I'll request you to be brief. What can be done? Because the Vice President is also saying, why does the Indian mind accept foreign information so easily? Do you think something... is this a normal process that will eventually take care of itself?
I don't think the Indian mind... No, I don't think the Indian mind any longer accepts this kind of information very easily. I don't think they've given. In fact, nobody has even watched the BBC documentary. It would have actually sunk like a stone if the BJP didn't want it to be in the in public domain and being discussed and regurgitate the memory of 2002 and the hounding of Modi since. But as for the credibility of the BBC, the conservative MPs during Thatcher's time used to call it the Bolshevik Broadcasting Corporation. It still is one of the most important tools of the global Western left, and which is why it has, and because it's unfortunate that the global West had to ally with radical Islam, globally. Which is why we see the kind of coverage about Pakistan, about Palestine. So it has been always anti-Israel, anti-India, and it is still playing out.
Okay.
But in this case, they have actually gifted the BJP with a fantastic opportunity.
Well, we'll leave it at that. I've run out of time. Who this benefits is a separate question, but does India need to be wary of what is happening, especially when it comes to quote-unquote doctored narratives, is what we tried to discuss. But speaking of the BBC documentary, Indian Youth Congress has knocked the Supreme Court's doors, challenging the ban on the airing and the linked circulation of the documentary on Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The petition also raises security of press as income tax raids or surveys are being conducted at the BBC offices. My colleague Ananya is joining us. Ananya, very quickly, could you tell us what more does the petition say and when does it come up for hearing?
Well, it's a fresh petition that has been filed before the topmost court of the country through the IYC's, that is Indian Youth Congress's legal cell, which clearly goes on to say that there is a hit on the independence of the freedom of press, as we are seeing raids on the BBC offices not only in Delhi but also in Bombay. Apart from that, what has also been said is various judgments have been cited with regards to free speech, and a specific prayer has been made that first of all, the ban on this particular documentary, which was imposed by the central government under emergency provisions, should be removed. Other prayer that is being made is that the documentary should be aired, and the government should ensure that wherever this documentary is being aired, or if a public hearing of this particular documentary is taking place, then there is no kind of a law and order situation that arises into this particular matter. Now, what has come to light is that these petitions that are there before the topmost court of the country, there are a batch of petitions. Once they say that the ban has to be taken off from this, all of those petitions, whether we talk of the petition filed by Mr. M.L. Sharma or the other petitions that have been filed by Prashant Bhushan, in fact Mahua Moitra as well, all of these petitions are before the topmost court of the country, but this new petition is still under defects, and as soon as the defects are cured, the matter would be listed. We might also see that there is urgent mentioning of
several petitions filed against the government's move. What happens? We'll wait and see. Moving